Hi, I'm James and welcome to another review. Today we're looking at Bolt Action's supplement for the campaign of the Mariana and Palau campaigns. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a Pacific gamer. I got this in the mystery box deal that Warlord do in the second one. I'll put a review up in the top corner for you to have a look at. They do still have a few left at the time of making this video, and probably will be doing more, I guess, because I think they've been pretty successful. So, it's not something I knew a lot about. I did some research for it. I did find out some very interesting little bits and pieces, and to be honest, you don't need to do that level of research. The book is very good. It's 160 pages long, which is quite a substantial amount, let's be perfectly honest. So, what does it contain? Well, as ever, it's got the usual detail. Working with Warlord games makes this a massive plus because there's a lot of artwork recycled from them. A few from the Weapon series by particularly like the artist Peter Dennis. He's got quite a few in here. So there's a fair bit there. There's also a lot of shots of tables and games going on. Or more usually pause shots, I think, but they are really nice as well. They give the atmosphere. So let's actually go through what we've got. We've got a good contents page to start off. There is no index, but with a contents page that's not too much of an issue. There's odd little bits that you might struggle to find, but flipping through you will find them. So it gives the background first of all, and we have different scenarios. Now, I think this is one of the weaker areas of the book. There are actually only 4 generic scenarios, most of which are then modified with specifics. But we have a beach landing, we have counter-attack, advance, and a strong point assault. So they are covering pretty much the obvious examples, and interestingly most will play both ways. Beach assault does tend to be very American assault, I'm going to be honest, but there's nothing stopping you using it outside of the campaign. So we have the details there. It then starts going into the details of the Marianas campaign, which the Americans called Operation Forager. A couple of pages background on that, and then goes into the Battle of Saipan, 15th of June to the 9th of July. And I like each section on this. They give the American plan and the Japanese plan, neither of which really survive contact with each other. But it's nice. It's a nice touch. I actually, in all fairness, think there's probably about as much content in this on the history side as there is in, say, an Osprey Elite series or one of the campaign books. So actually, you don't really need that level of extra knowledge. So it starts with a strategy and some absolutely excellent maps taken from the campaign books, and then you got a scenario 1, D-Day in Saipan, which basically in this case I'll sort of give a detail of one of the scenarios. It gives you the scenario type beach landing, so it tells you which rule to use, the objective, so it tells you what objective the players have, setup if there's any changes from the base scenario, what actual opposing forces we used, what restrictions you've got. So for example in this one it tells you which unit it is, the American 3rd Battalion 23rd Regiment 4th Marine Division landing at Blue 1 Beach, and it tells you that you can use the US Marine Saipan 1944 Theatre Selector on page 46. No Stuart or Satan tanks may be taken, additionally no artillery or air observers allowed. And for the Japanese, it's from the southern sector of Saipan, and they can include tanks but not air support. Use the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy Saipan 1944 Theatre Selector on page 48. So special deployment rules and what the victory conditions are. So each scenario is modifying the base scenario. It then gives you the aftermath, what actually happened in real life, and scattered through the books are top secret sections. The first one we've got here is the Navajo Code Talkers, made famous by the film Wind Talkers. does pick up something which I think is really important with that, the fact that even if they'd been captured, there wasn't a lot they could have done because the code constantly evolved. So it's a useful little bits of trivia, really, I suppose. They don't never actually seem to take much impact on the game, but they're not intended to. It's knowledge, and let's be honest, a lot of wargaming should be about history and learning. You know, it's a great way. I've used it to teach my grandson bits of history about the Vikings, so I don't have a problem with that. So we then get into scenario 2, the Japanese counter-attack, and again it gives exactly the same format with the aftermath. Then the scenario 3, the Finasusa Ridge, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Again, gives you the details. That time it's an advanced scenario, and again you've got the aftermath. Bit of a top secret here, details on a Medal of Honor winner. Scenario 4, an unusual one this actually, the Armoured Banzai. It's an actual Japanese tank attack, which isn't particularly common among gamers, but it's a nice little... And actually I've just read that does include a Navajo code talker in that one, where it's just an objective marker. It's I suppose that's a nice little touch. Again, you've got the aftermath, and you've got another interesting top secret one. Throughout the text there are heroes of both sides, and this one's an unusual one. It's a private. Most of them are generally quite senior officers, but this one's Private Lee Marvin, the actor. It actually gives details about his military service, which is actually quite interesting. Gives us a special rule, and there's no reason you couldn't use that as other Medal of Honor winners or other sort of heroes. It's a nice touch. So then we go into scenario 5, Death Valley. It's an advanced scenario, and again there's all the details. This time you've actually got the night fighting rules in effect. You have the aftermath. Scenario 6, Harakiri Gulch, which was a Japanese counterattack. You've got a hero of the Pacific again. You've then got scenario 7, which I'm going to pronounce completely wrong, Ichiyoku Gyokusai, 100 million shattered jewels. So again you have the details for that, the aftermath of that, and that concludes the battle for Saipan. So it then gives you the history as to what happened at the end. You've then got the theatre selectors. For this one you've got the US Marines, which is the 2nd Marine Division and the 4th Marine Division. It gives details of the US Marine squads. You've also got US Army for the 27th Infantry Division. It's often forgotten that the US Army were involved in the Pacific. The Thin Red Line was one of the big attempts, I suppose, to counter that. You've then got the Japanese selectors. All fairly straightforward. And that's sort of a sample of one of the campaigns. You then move on to the Battle of Guam, 21st of July to the 10th of August. Again, it follows exactly the same format. Plenty of scenarios again, all variations on the basic one. You then move into the Battle of Tinian, 24th of July to the 1st of August. And again, it breaks it down, going through each of the ones. You've then got the Guam theatre selectors for the 3rd Marine and the 77th Infantry for the Americans, and the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy. They don't tend to break those down in quite the same way. It then talks about the aftermath of the whole Operation Forager at this point, so it gives you that, and moves on to the Palau Island campaign. So it looks at the Operation Stalemate 2, again gives all the background for that. Then goes into the Battle of Palau, I think, I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, 15th September to the 27th of November. Goes through everything again there. All the usual bits and pieces. We get quite a few scenarios now, because by the end of that we're up to, just looking how many scenarios that is, and we're still going, 20 scenarios by this point. Then we get the next one, the Battle of Angar, 17th of September to the 22nd of October, and again everything for that. That's just only got a couple of scenarios for that, and it then gives the Palau US Theatre Selectors and the Japanese Theatre Selectors for the 1st Marine Division and the 81st Army Division, and again just the Japanese Imperial Army and Navy. They've got slight variance within them. The lists seem fairly balanced, or as balanced as they can be. Obviously the Japanese suffer badly from certain aspects like lack of anti-tank weapons and lack of heavy tanks, but they're balanced against each other, and they are realistic, which is what I'd rather. So it then talks about the aftermath of the operation there. The thing with these were very compact battles. Some of the islands perhaps 5 miles by 2 miles, for example, in one case I remember reading through it. So you know they are quite compact battles. There will be a lot of troops there in reality, but the terrain will be quite dense as well. So we then go into the section on new units. So for the Japanese, we've got an Imperial Japanese Army Engineer Squad. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. You've then got the Imperial Japanese Army Machine Gun Section. Now this is strange, for want of a better description. Most armies would have a gun crew reasonable size. The Japanese Machine Gun Company, which was part of every infantry battalion, had 3 machine gun platoons, and these were made up of 4 sections. Okay, it's nothing unusual so far, except each crew was up to 10 strong. So really you're actually talking an infantry section with a medium machine gun, not a light machine gun. Mainly because there were so many ammunition carriers, which, given the terrain they're operating in and the lack of mechanised transport, actually does make sense. But it was like, what moment would I thought that? We've got a naval militia squad, and a lot of these are usable outside. It's one of my little bugbears, I think, that we have the consolidated lists for the army, but then you then find that there's loads extra in these books. So I do get a little bit annoyed with that. So we've got an improvised anti-tank team. They've had the suicide ones in the armies of Imperial Japan, but these are the ones where you're talking more improvised weapons like logs to ram into the tracks, petrol bombs, things like that. So yeah, they can actually replace the suicide anti-tank team in any theatre, for example. So yeah, that makes sense. A lone sniper. A lot of the Japanese did use lone snipers. I've been doing a bit of reading on snipers, and I did have quite a surprise. I've always worked on the principle that in most cases snipers worked in pairs, but British doctrine appears to mix that. You have 2 in used defensively and 1 offensively, so that's a bit of an oddity. I'm going to have to look into a bit more. So you got lone sniper, and it picks up an interesting point that I never considered. I know they're always, the 6.5mm cartridge is always being considered a bit of an underpowered round, but it was ideal for snipers because the ranges were quite short, and the low power meant low noise and low recoil, but also less muzzle flash. So it actually was quite a suitable weapon. It also notes that they could carry a light machine gun sometimes, and it gives rules for that. You've got night infiltrators, because some of the scenarios are at night. They're only used with the night fighting rules. So there's rules for that. The rules for the Type 88 spigot mortar, the 80mm coastal gun, and an amphibious truck. So that's what the Japanese get. So there are a few nice ones in there, but most of them are just variants of current units. For the Americans, we've got chaplains, which repeats the rules. I know that they're in another book. I couldn't tell you which one. I know it's one I haven't got. So you have the rules for chaplains. You've then got variations of the assault squads, because there were a lot of variations of squads for assault, adding in flamethrowers and bazookas, things like that. So picking an example, there's 3 different versions of assault squads. So you've got a US Marine squad where these usually had the flamethrowers integrated into the squad. So you start out with an NCO and 3 men, 2 rifles, one's got a BAR, and 1 a flamethrower. And they've got anti-tank grenades representing the satchel charges. And you can add in then additional men. You're talking inexperienced, regular or veteran. They all come with rifles, anti-tank grenade. The NCO can have a submachine gun. It's one of my big bugbears that submachine guns are often overdone in American lists. I think we've got Hollywood to blame for that, but one's not too bad. 2 men can have BARs, and 3 can carry pistols as well. So that's a sort of a typical example. You've also got Marine Squad of replacements. These are inexperienced squads made up of whatever could be scraped together at the time. It'd be an interesting little force actually in some ways, because up to 9 can carry shotguns. That's quite a high number. And they've also got veteran US infantry squads. See, I would have thought these should have been in the basic list. You've also got the T-20 shoulder mortar, which was designed to supplement the bazooka, because a lot of bazooka rockets were failing to detonate in soft mud. It wasn't particularly effective. 100 were made for combat evaluation, but that's about it. You've then got a 20mm anti-aircraft gun, M2 for rocket truck, and the LVT for Ronson Mark 1 flamethrower. So yeah, a couple of nice ones there. You've got a few upgrades as well. You've got improvised side armour. You've got flamethrowers being added to M3s. 37mm acquires the canister round, and both sides get rifle grenades. There's a few special rules. You've got rules for ammo caches, for amphibious assaults, for barbed wire, rules for dug in with the Japanese defences, with spider holes and everything. Did strike me reading that wouldn't take a lot of modification to use for a bolt action Vietnam that occasionally gets mentioned in the fan sites. You've got rules for exhaustion, fortifications, Japanese infiltrators, mud, the monsoon season, minefields, and then there's a random roll for during games of tropical hazards, which often bring in one or more of those rules which aren't specified in a scenario. There's also a very good bibliography, some nice examples there. A couple of things I'd have liked to have seen added. It doesn't include John Wayne films, which I think would have been a good option, considering some of the footage from that was actually from real battles. But Iwo Jima, I know it's a different battle. But then again, you have in there. Something lost the page. You actually have in Letters for Iwo Jima, so there wasn't really an excuse to miss it. I think the Thin Red Line again would have been a good one there. It would have probably been good as well to put some novels in. I think that might have been quite useful. But overall, then 160 pages of text. Not something I would have gone out and bought, but quite glad I've got it, because it was a good read. There's a lot of details on the battles. I think if you're gaming it, there's probably less than I got out of it, because you probably will have that background knowledge, and there's not that much added for bolt action.